Before we step deeper into this nightmare, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments if you'd ever dare investigate something like this. It was a rainy Thursday night in November, the kind of evening where the city feels half asleep and half alive. I had just finished a long day of surveillance when the phone call came in. A woman's voice cracked through the static, begging for help to find her missing husband. I should have refused, but desperation has a way of pulling me in. Her name was Evelyn, and her fear was like a tremor in her every word. She insisted her husband Daniel hadn't come home in 3 days. The police had closed the case as a voluntary disappearance, but she swore he would never leave her. The way she spoke made me believe she wasn't lying. I agreed to meet her at a cafe on the edge of town, where the rain tapped the windows like restless fingers. She looked tired, her eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights. A small photograph slid across the table. Daniel, smiling in brighter days. She whispered that the smile was the only thing keeping her sane. She handed me a set of apartment keys wrapped in a trembling napkin. "Please," she said, "just check his place. Something's wrong." Her fingers lingered too long on the keys, as if she feared they burned her. I nodded, promising to return with answers she might not want. The truth always cuts, but lies rot deeper. Driving to Daniel's apartment, the city blurred in neon and rain. Every streetlight bent in the water-slick asphalt like ghosts stretching across the road. I couldn't shake the thought that I was heading into a story already half-written, where my role was inked long before I agreed. The air grew heavier with each block. The building itself was old, its bricks stained by decades of storms and neglect. I parked under a broken street lamp that flickered against the wet ground. Standing outside, I felt watched, not by people, but by the silence pressing down on the place. Silence can weigh more than sound when it wants to. The stairwell smelled of damp concrete and forgotten lives. I climbed each creaking step, my footsteps echoing like unwelcome intrusions. At the 4th floor, the hallways stretched long and narrow, doors sealed tight like mouths refusing to speak. Daniel's door was at the very end, waiting like a period at the close of a sentence. Sliding the key into the lock, I hesitated. Locks are thresholds, and once opened, there's no return to what came before. The tumblers clicked in a way that felt too loud, as if announcing my trespass. When the door finally creaked open, the darkness inside seemed too thick for an ordinary apartment. The air was heavy, dense with a sour tang of spoiled food, and something sharper, like rust. My flashlight cut through the gloom, painting fragments of a life paused mid-scene. Clothes were folded neatly on a chair. A dinner plate, half-eaten, sat at the table, mold creeping across its edges. It felt staged yet lived in. The silence was complete, too complete. Not even the hum of a refrigerator or the ticking of a clock. It was as if the room itself was holding its breath. My boots stuck slightly against the warped wooden floor, each step a slow intrusion into someone's private nightmare. I wanted to leave, but I kept moving deeper. On the coffee table lay a stack of unopened letters, their edges curled with moisture. The top envelope bore Evelyn's handwriting, her name looping in worry across the paper. I didn't touch them. Sometimes, it's better not to disturb what someone left behind. Letters often carry truths that should never be read aloud. Then I reached the kitchen and froze. Sitting at the table was Daniel, his skin pale as wax, his head tilted slightly, and his eyes glassy but wide open. His lips twitched, forming shapes in the silence. My name, I swear. In that suffocating quiet, he whispered my name. I staggered back, gripping the wall as bile burned the back of my throat. Dead eyes don't move, but his followed me. Even as his body didn't stir, every logical thought screamed he was gone, yet every instinct knew he wasn't finished. My pulse pounded louder than the rain outside, drowning reason. I should have run, slammed the door, thrown the keys back into Evelyn's trembling hands. But something anchored me in that room. A gravity I couldn't break. His lips still moved, soundless, whispering secrets I wasn't meant to know. That moment became the first step into a nightmare I couldn't escape. And then, without warning, Daniel's hand twitched. Just once. A spasm, or a signal. I didn't wait to find out. I stumbled backward, heart hammering, but my eyes never left his. I knew then this case was not about finding a missing man. It was about surviving what he had become. I staggered back, gripping the wall as bile burned the back of my throat. Dead eyes don't move, but his followed me, even as his body didn't stir. Every logical thought screamed he was gone, yet every instinct knew he wasn't finished. My pulse pounded louder than the rain outside, drowning reason. I should have run, slammed the door, thrown the keys back into Evelyn's trembling hands. But something anchored me in that room, a gravity I couldn't break. His lips still moved, soundless, whispering secrets I wasn't meant to know. That moment became the first step into a nightmare I couldn't escape. And then, without warning, Daniel's hand twitched. Just once. A spasm, or a signal. I didn't wait to find out. I stumbled backward, heart hammering, but my eyes never left his. I knew then this case was not about finding a missing man. It was about surviving what he had become. I closed the fridge with a trembling hand, the thud echoing too loud in the small kitchen. My eyes darted back to Daniel, expecting him to be gone, but he hadn't moved. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being observed by something beyond him, something using him like a mask. The air pressed colder against my skin. I moved to the living room, where the curtains hung heavy, damp with rain seeping in through the cracked window frame. The carpet squelched faintly under my boots, as if the storm had invaded long ago. On the wall, a family photograph tilted crooked. Evelyn smiled. Daniel smiled. But between them was a shadow that didn't belong. A chill rippled through me, sharp as a blade. Shadows are tricks of light, I told myself. But tricks can still tell truths. That photograph felt like a warning, a quiet message left for anyone who dared to look too closely. My breath misted in the air now, though the heat was still on. That wasn't possible. I reached for my phone to call Evelyn, to demand answers she hadn't shared. But the screen was dead, drained of battery, though it had been fully charged. Worse, my watch ticked erratically, the second hand spinning in fits like a heartbeat out of control. Time itself felt fractured inside that apartment. Panic urged me toward the door, yet my feet carried me further in, deeper into the living room. That's when I noticed the letters on the coffee table again. Except now, the top envelope wasn't Evelyn's. It bore my name, my own name, written in sharp strokes that weren't mine. My fingers trembled as I reached for it. The envelope was sealed with something dark, sticky, and brittle, blood dried into a crude bond. Against reason, I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, blank, except for a small phrase scratched in jagged ink. "You're late." My mouth went dry, my chest hollow. Late for what? Who had left this? The storm outside crashed louder, thunder shaking the walls like a giant's fists. I turned slowly, knowing Daniel was still behind me, but terrified of what I might see. He hadn't moved, but his lips still worked silently. My ears strained, and for the first time I thought I heard a sound, a faint whisper. It wasn't words, not exactly, but a hiss like air escaping through teeth. The sound crawled across the room, threading itself into my skull. I pressed my palms over my ears, but the whisper grew louder, inside me now instead of outside. My flashlight shook in my hand, the beam jittering across the room in frantic lines. The light caught on something new, scratches on the floor, long gouges leading from the table toward the hallway. The wood was torn in uneven paths, as if something had been dragged, clawed, or forced across it. My heart slammed against my ribs. Whatever happened here wasn't finished. I was standing inside its echo. The scratches ended at a door at the far side of the hallway. It was shut tight, its frame warped as though swollen from water damage. A faint hum seeped through the crack beneath it, low and pulsing, almost like a living breath. I knew I shouldn't open it, but my hand was already reaching out. As my fingers brushed the knob, ice seared my skin, sharp enough to draw blood. I yanked my hand back, crimson smearing across the brass handle. The hum grew louder for a moment, then fell silent. Behind me, a sound broke the stillness. A creak, a chair moving. Daniel was no longer seated. The flashlight beam darted wildly, cutting through the dark corners of the apartment. My chest heaved, lungs burning with cold air, eyes searching for him. The kitchen chair was empty, tilted slightly as though abandoned mid-movement. But Daniel was nowhere in sight. And yet I knew I wasn't alone in that apartment anymore. The apartment seemed to breathe after Daniel vanished, the walls contracting and expanding with invisible lungs. Every instinct told me to run, but my body betrayed me, rooting me to the warped floor. My ears strained for footsteps, a shuffle, anything. But the silence returned, thicker than before, the kind of silence that listens back. I swept the flashlight toward the hallway again, its beam trembling with my unsteady grip. The scratched floor glistened faintly where blood from my hand had smeared across the grooves. That trail of red looked like it belonged there, as if the apartment had been waiting for me to finish it. I swallowed hard, forcing my feet forward. The door at the end of the hallway loomed larger now, pulsing faintly with that same humming rhythm I thought had gone silent. My chest tightened with each step closer, my breath fogging in the air despite the heat still clicking faintly through the vents. I reached for the knob again, praying it wouldn't burn me twice. This time, the handle was cool, almost inviting, and the hum inside had softened, like it was waiting for me to listen instead of resist. I twisted slowly, the click of the latch sharp as a gunshot in the stillness. When the door creaked open, the smell that poured out made my stomach lurch. It wasn't rot, not exactly, but something close, sweet and cloying, like flowers left to die in a sealed room. My flashlight swept across the darkness, catching on something metallic. Dozens of mirrors lined the walls, tall and narrow, reflecting fragments of my beam, but none of them reflected me. I staggered back, shaking the light across them again and again. My reflection was absent, yet the glass wasn't empty. In every mirror stood Daniel, not the Daniel from the kitchen, but versions of him, older, younger, decayed, rotting, screaming. 1,000 faces staring at me through silver glass, none blinking. The whispers returned, louder this time, bleeding from the mirrors instead of the walls. Each reflection mouthed something different, yet the sound tangled into a single layered chorus. My name again, stretched and warped until it didn't sound human. My knees buckled, forcing me to clutch the doorframe to stay upright. I wanted to close the door to seal that nightmare inside, but the mirrors rippled as though the glass was liquid. One Daniel pressed his palm against the surface from the inside, his skin splitting open as if the glass itself sliced him. Blood smeared across the mirror's face, dripping down to the warped floorboards. The hum grew sharper, turning into a steady throb that shook the walls. My flashlight flickered, dying in my grip until only one mirror glowed faintly on its own. It wasn't Daniel staring back anymore. It was me, but not me as I was. A twisted, hollow version, my eyes black pits, my smile too wide. The reflection lifted its hand, mirroring mine with cruel precision. Except when I dropped the flashlight, it kept holding its beam steady and strong. The room was now lit by my double, who stepped forward through the glass like it was nothing but water. I stumbled backward, crashing into the hallway wall. The double smiled with teeth that didn't match mine, too sharp and too many. Its lips moved, but the voice came from everywhere. "You're late." The same words from the letter, echoing in the hum, in Daniel's silence, in my very bones. My throat closed, leaving me gasping like a drowning man. Then the mirrors began to shatter one by one, glass exploding outward as though the apartment itself had reached its breaking point. Each shatter released a new sound. Screams, sobs, laughter, voices of people I didn't know yet, felt I should. The floor shook beneath me, rattling loose plaster from the ceiling. The double didn't flinch, stepping closer with a predator's patience. My hand scrambled along the floor until I found the flashlight again, its beam sputtering weakly. I aimed it at the figure, but the light passed straight through as though it wasn't fully there. Still, it grinned, savoring my helplessness. I staggered backward into the hallway, slamming the door shut behind me. The hum cut off instantly, leaving only the ringing in my ears. But then I noticed something that froze me colder than any whisper. The scratches on the floor had changed direction. Now they led from the hallway straight back to the kitchen. I turned my head slowly, dread coiling through my gut. In the faint glow from the rain-smeared window, the chair was no longer empty. Daniel was back in his seat at the table, lips still moving, eyes still fixed on me. Only this time, he wasn't whispering my name. He was whispering, "Run." Daniel's warning echoed in my skull, though his lips made no sound I could truly hear. Run. But where could I run? The door was behind me, yet my legs refused to move. His eyes were wet with something that wasn't tears, a glistening film that shimmered like oil. He was trapped, I realized, trapped inside himself. For the first time that night, I thought of Evelyn, her shaking hands as she slid me the keys, the hollowness in her eyes. Did she know what her husband had become, or was she clinging to the hope that I'd find him alive? My chest ached with the cruel truth. If I told her what I saw, it would destroy her. I remembered her whisper at the cafe, barely audible over the rain. "He's all I have." Those words dug into me now, heavier than the silence of the apartment. Losing a husband is one thing, but losing him like this, stolen by something unexplainable, something no one could fight, that was a cruelty beyond measure. Daniel's body shifted, his head tilting as if straining to speak against invisible threads. His mouth formed words I couldn't understand this time, syllables spilling too fast, too distorted. His eyes pleaded with me, but his body betrayed him, jerking in strange spasms like a puppet pulled by a cruel hand. I took a step forward without meaning to, flashlight trembling in my grip. Some part of me wanted to reach him, to grab his shoulder and tell him he wasn't alone. But another part, the part that screamed survival, knew that touch might be the end of me. His shadow stretched unnaturally long across the wall, bending wrong. "Evelyn," I whispered, my voice breaking in the suffocating quiet. Her name grounded me, tethering me to something outside this nightmare. If she were here, what would she do? Would she run to him, no matter the cost? Or would she freeze like I did, torn between love and terror? I prayed I'd never know. The whispers swelled again, rising and falling like a storm tide. I dropped to my knees, clutching my ears, but it wasn't sound. It was inside my thoughts now, twisting memories, painting Evelyn's face onto every shadow. I saw her crying in the mirrors, screaming behind glass, her hands pounding for me to let her out. Tears burned my own eyes. Unexpected and raw. I hadn't cried in years, not since my wife left me for a life untouched by danger and death. Yet here I was, weeping for a woman I barely knew, weeping for the love she might never hold again. Maybe that's what the house wanted, sorrow deep enough to drown me. I forced myself to look back at Daniel. His lips slowed, forming one clear word over and over: "Please." The fear in his eyes wasn't for himself. It was for her, for Evelyn. He wanted me to leave him, to go to her, to keep her from stepping into this place ever again. My throat closed at the weight of it. For the first time, I believed him. He wasn't asking me to save him. He was begging me to abandon him. That realization split me open, carving a wound deeper than any mirror could. Private investigators aren't supposed to care. We find, we report, we walk away. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Evelyn's fate was tied to mine. The storm outside roared, lightning throwing jagged light through the window. For a heartbeat, I saw Daniel's reflection in the glass, but not as he was. I saw him as Evelyn must have remembered him, smiling, warm, alive. My heart cracked with the weight of it. That man was gone, and all that remained was a shell. And then footsteps, not Daniel's, softer, lighter, echoing down the hallway. I whipped the flashlight toward the sound, pulse hammering in my throat. At the end of the hall, just beyond the warped door, a figure stood. Not Daniel, not me, Evelyn. Her face pale, eyes wide, her hand pressed against the frame. "No," I gasped, stumbling toward her. But she didn't move. She was frozen, lips trembling as if forming my name. My heart seized. Had she followed me here, or was this another trick, another mask the apartment wore? The thought clawed at my mind, tearing holes in reason. Daniel slammed his fist against the table, the sound like a gunshot. His body convulsed violently, eyes rolling back. His lips screamed words without sound, but I knew what he was saying. Not her, not her. His warning was too late. The figure at the end of the hall began to walk toward us. The whispers swelled into a scream, filling every corner of the apartment, vibrating in my teeth and bones. I staggered, clutching the wall as Evelyn's figure drew closer, her footsteps leaving no sound. My breath came ragged, my body torn between shielding Daniel and protecting the woman who might not even be real. The storm outside reached its peak, thunder splitting the night. Evelyn, if it was her, stopped just short of the kitchen. her face finally visible. And what I saw broke me more than any whisper, any mirror, any shadow. She was smiling, but her eyes were empty. She looked at Daniel, then at me, and whispered, "You're late." Her voice hollowed the air, those two words scraping deeper than any scream could. "You're late." My chest tightened as Evelyn's smile held, unblinking, unnatural. She wasn't Evelyn, not truly. I felt it in my bones. This was the same mimicry I saw in the mirrors, wearing her face like a mask. Daniel thrashed violently at the table, his chair toppling as his body convulsed. His lips no longer begged, no longer pleaded. They shouted silently but with unmistakable clarity, "Not her, not her." His eyes rolled toward me, veins bulging in his neck as if something inside was trying to tear free. I stepped between them, flashlight shaking wildly, its weak beam cutting the stormlight. "Stay back," I shouted, though my voice broke under the weight of it. The figure of Evelyn only smiled wider, tilting her head in a way no human neck should tilt. Her eyes burned black, swallowing every glint of light. The whispers surged again, this time forming words I couldn't mistake. They weren't in my head anymore. They filled the apartment itself. "She called you. She knew. She brought you here." My stomach lurched as bile rose in my throat. Evelyn hadn't been innocent. The missing person story was a lure, not a plea. Daniel slammed his fists on the table again, blood smearing across the wood as his skin split under unseen strain. He stared at me with pure desperation, his body breaking under the force of something neither of us could fight. His lips mouthed one final word before he collapsed. "Run." But I didn't move. My mind spun as the pieces clicked together. Evelyn had called me, yes, but not to save her husband. She had called me because the apartment needed another. It needed me. The truth sank like a blade into my gut. I wasn't investigating Daniel's disappearance. I was replacing him. The figure advanced, her footsteps weightless, her smile splitting wider until it nearly reached her ears. My light flickered against her form, but instead of revealing, it distorted. Her skin bubbled like wax, peeling to reveal shadows crawling beneath. Evelyn's voice came again, layered now, dozens of tones speaking in unison. "Late, too late." I stumbled backward, my spine slamming against the wall. The apartment groaned as though alive, beams creaking, plaster raining dust from the ceiling. My ears rang with overlapping voices, chanting a rhythm that pulsed with the storm. I could barely breathe, each inhale sharp with the stench of rot and iron. Daniel's body jerked once, twice, then went still. His eyes stared glassy and lifeless toward the ceiling, his lips finally still. He was gone, or worse, his purpose here was finished. The whispers quieted for a moment, as though the room itself sighed with satisfaction, and then the figure's gaze locked fully onto me. "You're late," she said again. But this time I understood. It wasn't a statement, it was a sentence. I was late to the game, late to see what had been happening here all along. I wasn't the investigator anymore. I was the next subject, bound by something I hadn't even realized I agreed to. The walls bled moisture, streaks of dark water running down the peeling wallpaper. The floor rippled under my boots, soft as flesh, making me stumble to keep balance. I gagged as the smell of soil and decay filled the air. The apartment wasn't just haunted, it was alive, and it wanted me inside forever. The figure of Evelyn split open at the seams, her face tearing like paper until only shadow remained. From that shadow, a hand reached, long, spindly fingers tipped with nails sharp as glass. The air screamed with the sound of 1,000 voices as the hand stretched toward my chest, ready to claim me. I swung the flashlight with all the strength I had, the beam cracking against the thing's face. Sparks flew, the bulb shattered, and darkness swallowed the apartment whole. But for a brief moment I heard it scream. Not Evelyn's voice, not Daniel's, but something ancient and furious. The sound shook my bones. In that blackness I fumbled, scraping my hands across the walls until I found the door frame. My chest heaved, lungs burning, heart sprinting against time itself. I ran blind through the hallway, slamming shoulder first into walls, crashing into furniture, every step echoing like a drumbeat of desperation. Behind me, the whispers chased. But when I reached the door, my stomach dropped into my shoes. The handle was gone, just smooth, rotting wood where the exit had been. I clawed at it with bloodied fingers, splinters cutting deep into my skin. The whispers grew closer, pressing against the back of my neck, cold as the grave. I pressed my forehead against the wood, tears burning down my face. I wasn't crying out of fear anymore. I was crying because I realized I had been chosen long before I stepped into this building. Evelyn hadn't hired me to save Daniel. She had offered me to it, a replacement for her broken husband. The storm outside cracked lightning across the sky, casting one final flash through the window. In that light, I saw them all, the reflections from the mirrors, hundreds of Daniels lined across the room, their mouths open in eternal screams. And in the center, my own reflection, waiting, smiling, already part of the collection. When I finally stumbled out of that building, I didn't remember how. My memory cuts like film reels missing frames. Darkness, whispers, lightning, then silence. I woke on the cracked pavement outside, rain soaking my clothes, dawn creeping pale across the skyline. The door behind me was gone, replaced by a blank wall of brick. I staggered down the empty street, choking on breath and disbelief. No one stopped, no one noticed. To them, I must have looked like another sleepless drunk crawling home. But every step I took was heavy with the truth. I hadn't escaped. I had only been released to tell, to carry, to spread. The police didn't believe me. They laughed at my story, jotted down half-hearted notes, then marked the file unstable witness. No apartment complex matched the address I gave. The record showed nothing had ever been built there. Abandoned lot, they called it, though I knew what I saw, what I lived. I went to the library archives next, searching for property records. Dust choked the air as I flipped through brittle papers and film reels. That's when I found the first trace. An article from 1957. Tenants vanish from Riverside Apartments. The headline screamed, 5 families gone in one night. The building condemned. But then another article from 1968 described the same address again. Newly built, newly inhabited. A fresh start for the city, it read. And then, another disappearance. Over decades, the same property resurfaced, vanished, resurfaced again. Like the building itself rebuilt, reborn. Every time it was destroyed. Feeding, waiting. I reached out to a local historian, an old man named Caro, who spoke with more caution than certainty. He said some properties were anchors, places where something older than the city had rooted itself. It doesn't care who owns the land, he told me, voice shaking. The building grows back. It wants bodies. Caro warned me to stop digging, but I couldn't. I interviewed past tenants whose names I traced through utility bills. Those still alive described the same whispers at night, the same mirrors refusing to reflect properly. Most were reluctant to speak at all, terrified the building might hear them if they did. One woman broke down crying in front of me. She told me her brother had been taken in the 80s, lost forever inside the apartment walls. She swore she could still hear him whisper through her own bathroom mirror sometimes. It doesn't let go, she whispered, eyes hollow. Even when you leave. I took recordings, grainy cassettes of testimonies filled with sobs, static, and background noises. I couldn't explain. On one tape, while the woman spoke, a second voice overlapped hers, a deep, wet growl muttering in cadence with her speech. When I played it back for her, she fainted instantly. Still, no official records matched what I collected. Every address I cross-checked led back to empty lots. Even when I drove there myself, the building wasn't always visible. Sometimes the street was just a stretch of gravel. Other times, the structure loomed tall, but no one else could see it. I began to fear the building was choosing when to show itself, pulling people in selectively. It wasn't a permanent fixture, it was a predator, camouflaging itself until hunger drove it into sight. And worse, I wondered if I was now its lure, its mouthpiece, a walking witness to bring others close. The deeper I looked, the sicker I felt. My skin itched at night. My reflection sometimes lagged in the mirror, smiling slower than I did. My apartment lights flickered in rhythm with the whispers that returned every time I closed my eyes. I realized then I hadn't left it behind at all. It had followed me. Experts I reached out to, psychologists, priests, even self-proclaimed occultists, each gave me different answers. Trauma, psychosis, cursed land, thin veil between worlds. They argued over terms, but none could explain why my tapes warped. why my photographs showed rooms bending at impossible angles. None could explain why I still heard Daniel. Yes, Daniel. His voice scratched through the static at night, pleading, broken, the same word repeating endlessly. Run, run. But where could I run? The city itself felt like it bent toward that place. Every alley, every dead end circling back to Riverside. No road out, no escape. Caro eventually stopped answering my calls. When I visited his office, it was emptied overnight. No trace he'd ever been there, just an imprint of a chair on the dusty floor, as though erased too cleanly. That's when I realized the building didn't just eat tenants. It devoured anyone who tried to uncover it. The investigation no longer felt like research. It felt like a countdown. Each question I asked, each note I wrote, I felt the weight pressing closer. The building wanted silence, secrecy, and I was breaking its rules with every word, every discovery. And then the calls started. Static filled, late at night, a voice whispering on the line. Not Evelyn's, not Daniel's, not mine, just 3 words, every time, in that same chorus of overlapping tones. We're not done. The calls didn't stop. They grew louder, sharper, echoing through every device I owned. Phones, radios, even the static between television channels. No matter how I tried to cut the cord, the voices bled through. We're not done. They weren't just contacting me. They were consuming the channels of communication around me. One night, I unplugged everything in my apartment, sat in the dark with only a candle burning. That's when I heard it, faint whispers threading through the flame itself. The wax hissed as if speaking, shaping syllables in the air. You brought us out. My hands trembled. My silence hadn't been enough. The truth clawed at me. I hadn't escaped with a story. I had carried something out of Riverside. It was leaking, seeping into the world through me. Every question I asked, every word I spoke about it, only spread the infection further. The building wasn't bound to one address anymore. It was bound to me. I tested the theory. I tried not speaking about the building for days. The whispers quieted, only slightly, lingering like a fever I couldn't shake. But when I told one trusted friend what happened, his face went pale.
That night he vanished.
Police reports called it suicide, but I knew better. The reflection in my bathroom showed him sometimes. My friend standing behind me whispering for help. His mouth moved silently, eyes wide with terror. But when I turned, the room was empty. His ghost wasn't his own. It was the building's feeding me reminders of my guilt, strengthening its hold on me. I realized then, the building didn't just want tenants anymore. It wanted witnesses, carriers. Each story told, each ear that listened became another thread in its web. I hadn't been chosen to feed it. I'd been chosen to spread it. And worse, I was doing exactly what it wanted right now. I burned my notes, smashed the tapes, destroyed the photos. The smoke filled my lungs, acrid and bitter, but the whispers didn't fade. They laughed. Too late. They had already seeped into me. The records were irrelevant. The story itself was the infection. Memory alone was enough. Sleep abandoned me entirely. Every time I closed my eyes, I woke somewhere else. Not dreams places. Hallways of peeling wallpaper, stairwells that twisted into nothing, mirrors that reflected rooms I'd never seen. And in each, Evelyn's voice called faintly, "You're late." A reminder, a curse, a sentence. One night I woke in my own bed but couldn't move. My body was paralyzed, pinned by invisible weight. Shadows crawled across the ceiling, bending toward me like dripping tar. My jaw clenched against the urge to scream as one shadow leaned close, whispering, "We're in your walls now." The escalation was undeniable. It wasn't just haunting me, it was multiplying. Neighbors complained of whispers in their hallways, of doors vanishing overnight. One family on my block disappeared without a trace. Police marked it as relocation, but I saw their furniture still inside, rotting behind sealed curtains. I confronted the building, or what was left of it. The lot where Riverside once stood was rubble now, cordoned off with rusted fencing. But when I climbed over, the ground wasn't dirt. It was soft, pulsing, almost alive beneath my boots. When I pressed my hand down, I swore I felt a heartbeat. That night, I dreamt of Daniel again. Only it wasn't a dream. I knew it wasn't. He sat at the same table, staring at me with lifeless eyes. "You can't destroy it," he said, voice breaking. "You can only feed it or spread it, and you've already chosen." Then his body split open into shadow. I woke screaming, but not alone. The scream echoed back, perfectly synchronized, coming from the mirror across the room. My reflection screamed with me, but then it didn't stop. Even after I shut my mouth, my reflection kept howling, clawing at the glass, desperate to trade places. That's when I understood. The building wasn't in one place anymore because it had grown roots through me. My walls, my mirrors, my street, all were extensions of it now. The infection wasn't physical, it was narrative. Every retelling made it stronger. Every listener gave it ground to grow. And so here I am, telling you this. Every word I speak, every detail I share, is another seed planted. Maybe you hear the whispers already. Maybe tonight your reflection won't look quite right. But that's the rule. The building survives because its story does. And now you're part of it too. The night it finally broke, the storm returned. The same storm from Riverside tearing across the city with banshee winds and hollow thunder. My lights died instantly, plunging the apartment into suffocating dark. And then, as if on cue, every mirror in my home began to hum with a low, vibrating tone. I grabbed the flashlight I swore I'd never use again. But when I clicked it on, the beam didn't fall on the room I knew. It revealed hallways, Riverside's hallways bleeding through my own walls. My apartment was collapsing inward, folding into the building's shape. My safe place was gone. The hum rose into a chorus, voices overlapping, chanting words too ancient for me to understand. My ears bled under the pressure, warm streaks running down my neck. The walls shook violently, picture frames crashing, plasters snowing down from the ceiling. And in the mirrors, shapes pressed forward, begging to be let through. Then Evelyn appeared again. Her shadow form, her smile wider than humanly possible. "You brought them," she whispered, stepping from the mirror as though it were water, her eyes locked on mine with predatory hunger. "You carried us." I stumbled back, but my heels struck soft ground, pulsing with a heartbeat. Daniel's voice erupted from the walls. "Don't look at her," he screamed. Though his body never appeared, his voice echoed from every direction, breaking with static distortion. For a moment, I wondered, was he trying to save me, or was it just another lure? Trust itself felt like a death sentence. The mirrors cracked one by one, shattering outward instead of inward. Shards rained across the floor, but instead of glass, they were reflective pools, gateways. And through each, hands emerged, clawing, pulling themselves forward. Dozens of them. Hundreds. The building wasn't confined to one host anymore. It was multiplying. I screamed and grabbed the only weapon near me. A broken chair leg. Hey Dick. Useless, but heavy enough to swing. I slammed it into one mirror, then another. But each blow only spread the infection further. The reflective liquid splashing across the walls, forming new doorways, new mouths. The chorus of voices roared into a scream, deafening, shaking my skull. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head, and then silence. Too much silence. The kind that weighs on your lungs. I opened my eyes and everything was gone. My apartment, the storm, the city. Only blackness remained. I stood on a single wooden floorboard, floating in endless void. Around me, mirrors hung suspended in the air, each showing scenes, tenants screaming, families vanishing, investigators like me staring in horror. And in the center of them all, Evelyn, no longer shadow, no longer human, but a tower of twisting limbs. She leaned close, her voice now every voice I had ever heard from Riverside. "Tell it," she said. "Tell it again. Spread us. That is your only way out." My throat burned with bile. But I understood. She was offering me a choice. To live, I had to become the mouthpiece willingly. But defiance flared in me, raw and useless. "No," I spat. My refusal rippled through the void, shaking the mirrors violently. Daniel's voice screamed in pain. Evelyn's figure writhed, and the shadows surged forward. My skin split with burning light as they tried to tear me apart from the inside. The mirrors exploded, shards flying in every direction, slicing into my flesh. Each cut revealed not blood, but reflections of myself screaming. I fell to the wooden floorboard, writhing, every wound showing a different version of me. one giving in, one begging, one already swallowed by shadow. The void collapsed into a hallway again. The same endless, rotting hallway of Riverside. My legs shook, barely holding me upright. I staggered forward because there was nowhere else to go. The whispers guided me, 1,000 voices merging into one steady beat. Too late, too late. At the end of the hallway, a single door waited, glowing faintly. My hand reached for the knob on its own, trembling but compelled. The voices swelled into a crescendo, a tidal wave that drowned every thought. Behind me, I felt Evelyn's shadow closing in, her limbs stretching, reaching to claim me. I twisted the knob, heart hammering, breath torn from my lungs. And as the door creaked open, light poured out. Not the warm light of escape, but a pale, sterile glow. A hospital room, my hospital room. Machines beeping, nurses whispering, a doctor shaking his head, and me lying in the bed, comatose. The realization shredded me. Had I ever escaped the building at all? Was this coma my prison, my body a shell while Riverside fed through my story? I staggered into the room, reaching for myself, but the reflection in the hospital bed opened its eyes first, and they were Evelyn's. The eyes in the hospital bed locked onto mine. Evelyn's eyes, black voids that swallowed the beeping monitor's glow. My knees buckled as I staggered back into the hallway, but the doorway refused to let me leave. The light gripped me, holding me in place, dragging me toward the bed like a tide. I screamed for help, for anyone, nurses, doctors, Daniel, even strangers, but no sound escaped my mouth. My throat worked, but silence bled out instead. The monitors quickened, flatlining, restarting, skipping beats in unnatural rhythm. It wasn't a hospital, it was the building's final trap, dressed as mercy. The figure in the bed sat upright slowly, bones cracking with every movement, its lips parted, and dozens of voices spilled out at once. Evelyn, Daniel, Caro, my friend, the woman from the tapes, all of them speaking in unison. It's your turn now. My chest caved with dread. I stumbled back into the hallway, but now every door was open. Each room showed a different version of me. One still at Riverside's table, one bleeding on the floor, one smiling like Evelyn. They beckoned with shaking hands, whispering promises of relief if I chose one. But each choice felt like surrender. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head, tears streaming down my face. Memories of my real life flickered, my childhood home, my first case, moments of laughter long before Riverside. But they felt fragile now, like stolen photographs crumbling in my grip. Had any of it been mine, or had it always been theirs? For a heartbeat, I thought I saw Daniel at the end of the hall again. His eyes softer now, less desperate. He raised a trembling hand, pointing toward the only closed door left. His lips shaped one word, decide. Then his body dissolved into ash, carried away by the hallway's endless wind. I rose, broken and bleeding, forcing one step after another toward the closed door. The whispers surged angrily, pleading, bargaining. Tell it, spread it, feed it. My hand reached the knob, slick with sweat and blood. Behind me, the other versions of myself clawed from their rooms, screaming. With all my strength, I turned the knob. The door swung open, and silence crashed down. The hallway vanished. The storm faded. I stood alone in my apartment, every mirror shattered, every wall bare. For a fleeting second, it was over. Or so I prayed. But then I saw it. On my desk, a tape recorder I didn't own sat waiting. Its reels spun on their own, whispering softly, "We're not done." And beside it, a notepad. My handwriting sprawled across the page, words I had no memory of writing. "You will tell this story, again and again." My chest hollowed out, despair flooding me. It didn't matter if I chose silence. The story had already been written, already seeded. The infection was beyond me now. I wasn't the storyteller anymore. I was just another line in its endless script, another shadow feeding its hunger. I pressed my hands against my face, sobbing, but then froze. My reflection in the shattered glass shards wasn't crying. It was smiling, slow, deliberate, waiting. Each shard grinned back, teeth too sharp, eyes too wide. My reflection knew what I hadn't admitted yet. The story had already claimed me. The phone rang. I didn't own a phone anymore, but it rang shrill and relentless. Against every ounce of reason, I answered. Static screamed in my ear, and then Evelyn's voice seeped through. They're listening now. My stomach churned as I realized she wasn't talking to me. She was talking to you. I dropped the phone and backed into the corner of the room. The whispers rose again, not from the mirrors, not from the tape, not even from the walls. They came from inside me, my own voice, repeating the same phrase over and over. We're not done. We're not done. We're not done. That night, I stopped fighting. I sat at the desk, pressed record, and began to tell it all again. My voice shook, but the words flowed. The tape reels spun faster, feeding on every syllable. My hand trembled as I wrote notes for whoever would listen next, whoever would carry it forward. And now, here you are, hearing it. Maybe you believe me, maybe you don't. But tonight, when you walk past your mirror, when you hear static on your phone, when you wake to whispers in the walls, remember this: once you've heard the story, you're already part of it. So I leave you with this question, one I can't answer anymore. If the building survives by story, and you've listened this far, will you tell someone else? Or will you keep it to yourself, knowing silence may cost you everything?